Hello everybody, my name's Ian Boucher and I work for Emerald Publishing, and I'm going to talk to you today about research impact. Firstly, to talk about what we mean by impact. Secondly, to talk about why impact is becoming something that is increasingly important as we look around research and various countries around the world. And thirdly, to talk about how Emerald are supporting research impact and some of the services we offer to help researchers understand and deliver and plan effective research impact. So firstly, let's think what we mean when we talk about research impact. So it's important to say that we're not talking about the sort of academic impact that you may be familiar with, the impact of publishing an article and the citations it receives, or the impact factor of the journal it is published in, nor are we talking about the type of academic impact where published research or new research opens up new areas of investigation for academic researchers. What we are talking about is the changes that research brings about in the real world that we're able to demonstrate and that go beyond our research and academic communities, and changes that happen directly because of our research or our very broad research expertise. Or in other words, you could say it's why research really matters. As an example, if you're a climate change scientist and your research directly contributes to a reduction in carbon emissions, then you can say that your impact is really about reducing carbon emissions and hopefully slowing down climate change. So that's the type of impact that we're going to talk about today, and we're really going to explore what that means for research and why that is important. So impact is about taking our research from the academic and research environment and sharing the outcomes and the findings of our research with the world outside. And what it's about is really making sure that our research is really driving that difference in the world, building benefits to society, benefits to the economy, benefits to the environment, and cultural benefits, benefits to health. It's really about making sure that our research is providing that robust and secure evidence base that will drive innovations and change and policy that's going on in the outside world. And it's about understanding how we take our research from in the research and academic environment and share it effectively with those end users and stakeholders who aren't necessarily exposed to research all the time. So as we can say, impact really equals change. And that change can be thought about in a number of different ways. But broadly, we can think about it in one of two ways: either an increase, an improvement, or a growth in something, or a reduction, a lessening, or a lowering of something. So for example, we could be talking about impact as being driving increased efficiency, or improving effectiveness, or improving well-being, increasing engagement, widening and broadening access to information, increasing sales and profit, or growing skills in the wider population. Or it could be a reduction in things like mortality, waste, a lowering of risk, reduction in cost and staff turnover, a lowering of stress, or reducing the crime rates. So let's look at some specific examples in more detail. Let's think about some different types of research and impact and the type of examples of impact that you might see from that research. So let's think about first health and well-being. What are the sort of impacts that we might see from research in this area? Well, we might see research that leads to better outcomes for patients or their families or carers. We might also see that research and research evidence and information is able to tackle misleading health claims that appear in the media or on social media or even in products. We may also see research that improves the guidelines within health and social care, or indeed improves training processes, again, ultimately leading to patient benefits. If our research is, for example, thinking about contributing to education and learning and participation, we could see changes to the way children are taught, or changes to the curriculum informed by the research that we're producing. Or it could be a change in awareness and attitudes of sections of the wider public that they have to particular issues. So our research is better able to inform people and provide evidence that will contribute to a wider public debate that hopefully informs that debate in a better way than maybe the media would without our research. We might also see in the area of public policy law and services a contribution of research to policy-making decisions or decisions made based on legal information. We may also see our research influencing the work of international NGOs or charities, and they may respond to the research evidence and information that we're providing in order to change the work that they do or change the emphasis of their work. So hopefully now we've established some of the foundational ideas about what we mean by research impact. But what we want to explore a little bit here is why the research landscape is starting to adopt impact, and we know it's being adopted in various ways around the world. So I think one of the reasons is there's a general move away across certain parts of the world from the traditional research metrics to assess research. These are things that we've mentioned before, like quantitative research metrics like impact factor or citation metrics. And we're moving to placing an increased importance on the impact and the societal impact of research. And there's lots of reasons why this has happened. Some of it is as simple as being able to better articulate to the public why we're doing our research. And this is something that's becoming more and more important given the scarcity of research funding that we can see around the world and the need for really good justification and strong justification as to why research funds should be allocated in certain ways. And we've also even seen in recent times with things like COVID-19, the pandemic and the need for really robust and fast research information that can have a really big impact, really sort of contributing to that agenda as well. But I think there are lots of other reasons and factors behind the need to really think about impact. One of them is, of course, research assessment, which we've kind of mentioned in terms of thinking about different types of metrics to assess research with. But also, I think we've seen over the last 10, 15 years, a real move toward challenge and problem-based funding for research. So you can see that happening around the world where research funders are no longer purely giving money out for what is really robust, high quality academic research that offers original and significant findings. They really are looking at research as well that can address the global, local, national challenges and problems that we see. And we're seeing research driven more and more by this type of an agenda in lots of different markets across the world. And the main reason for this is that the money that funders have to give out is often contingent on being able to demonstrate how it will serve the public. And we see this more and more, and we see this response to industrial strategies or UN Sustainable Development Goals and all the different ways that we have of kind of categorizing these major challenges and problems. And really, when we drill it down, research impact is really a contribution to this. Being able to articulate the impact of our research is how we are able to really articulate the benefit that our research will bring about to society and how it will address these global, national, and even local challenges. So as I've just said, this research impact really does address these challenge-focused funding strategies, and we can sort of see how these work in this little model here. So we have a set of global, national, and local challenges that a funder in a particular country or a particular region of the world might be responding to. That then fills into their funding strategy, which then filters down into the type of research that they are funding. And the end point is that the people who are receiving that research funding will have to be able to articulate and demonstrate the solutions or benefits that their research will bring, which in other words is the research impact. And I think this role that impact is starting to play across the world, even where there isn't a formal research assessment framework that takes into account research impact, we can see that this role in terms of driving the funding landscape and being able to articulate how research responds to challenges is becoming increasingly important. So we've considered what we mean by research impact and then why research impact is becoming increasingly important. But let's start to think a little bit about the mechanics for how impact works, because we know there are markets around the world like the UK and Australia and one or two others in Europe where they are starting to look at how the mechanisms for impact, where they've gone through a number of assessment cycles to assess the quality of research impact that's going on, and the mechanisms on how impact really works is starting to be understood. So one of the key things and the most important thing I think to take home from this is that you don't get impact simply by carrying on publishing research, or you will get impact, but it just won't be as strong as the impact you get from engaging with the end users of research outside of the academic and research circle. And what does that really mean? What it means is we've got to develop effective mechanisms to take research from inside research institutions and get it out there to the people who can make the decisions or make the changes or deliver the innovations based on that research that will really drive impact. And we know that most of that process needs to be about engagement. It needs to be about sharing of knowledge. It needs to be about communicating and working in partnerships and networks. So impact is really about thinking about how we can communicate, exchange knowledge, work with, co-create with, and really develop relationships with the key stakeholders and the key end users outside in the world who will take on our research and make those changes. We know that anything new in research will come with some typical myths or misconceptions or misunderstandings about what it is. So there are a few that surround impact that we can look at. For example, impact is something big which happens at the end of a research project. So it's about doing the research, publishing it, and then always waiting for someone to do something with that research. That's not true. Most impact happens right from the start of research by engaging with those key stakeholders or research end users, as we've just discussed, and really taking them on the research journey and working with them to develop the outcomes and then see that research make that real impact in the world. Only applied research has impact. Again, this is the idea that only research that is designed explicitly to solve a very specific problem has impact. Again, it's not true. We know that from history. We can look through loads of research over decades, over hundreds of years that has impact, that changes the world, but it doesn't necessarily have the intention of doing so at the start, but it still has the potential to have that impact. And research to impact pathways are linear, again, is another big misconception. Often what will happen is research will be undertaken, there'll be research outcomes, and then things will change in the world, and suddenly those research outcomes will become critical, and that will then lead to impact. Or sometimes impact happens as research is being done rather than at the end, or rather than when the research outcomes are available. So it's often not a linear chain from publish a paper, piece of impact. It often is a much more dynamic and complex interaction between the research world and the world outside of research. So why are Emerald as a publisher thinking about real world impact or making a difference in the world with research? I think you have to go back and think that Emerald have always been a publisher that believes that their role goes beyond just the facilitation of research publication, but also to the facilitation of good research outcomes. And we can go back to 2018 when Emerald introduced our Real Impact Manifesto, our commitment to research having that real impact and that making that difference in the world. We're also signatories to DORA, which is of course about open research and supportive of open research. And open research is really important because it allows those non-academic stakeholders to have easier access to the research that is produced in the research environment and the academic world. And in 2022, we renewed our Real Impact Manifesto alongside a campaign called Are You In?, which is really about challenging researchers to think about, are they committed to the principles of their research, making that real difference in the wider world? At this stage, I'd like to introduce the idea of impact literacy. So what does impact literacy mean? Impact literacy is really building a chain of understanding among researchers so that they can start to understand, firstly, what changes or impact their research might have, who those changes will be felt on, and how it can be demonstrated. Secondly, for the researcher to be able to understand how that research impact can be mobilized into action. What is the pathway or plan to deliver research into impact? And then to think about who will be involved in that process, to identify the stakeholders, to understand what their purpose will be and what skills they will bring to the process. And then finally to think about what are the reasons, what are the objectives, and why is impact being pursued? and what are the ethical considerations around that, and to think a little bit beyond just what are the reasons that we want to deliver research impact, but also to think about the goals of the end users and stakeholders. This whole concept builds into this idea of impact literacy, which is the ability for a researcher to be able to understand, articulate their potential impact, and then be able to map out the process for that impact being delivered. So it's not just impact literacy that matters. It's also important that we think about how an organization can facilitate a sustainable and healthy impact culture. And indeed, the work of Dr. Julie Bailey and Dr. David Phipps has really extended this idea and built a model that looks at how research organizations can really organize and structure that allows them to enhance the impact that their researchers are having and build that in a sustainable and healthy way. So their model looks at the organizational clarity, connectivity, competencies, co-production, and commitment to impact, and it breaks that down so that people can understand exactly what makes and what goes into a really healthy, sustainable research impact culture within an organization. And this is really important because we know that engaging with the wider world, taking research beyond the academy, beyond our research environment, isn't something that necessarily is always straightforward. It can introduce new challenges, and it's important that alongside researchers doing that, there are the right institutional cultures and approaches to facilitate that. Another common myth that's often expressed is the idea that you can't plan for impact, that things that happen in the real world based on research are unforeseeable. This isn't really true. Whilst it's true that the wider world changes as time goes on, and it's not always easy to predict what research impact might be, we can definitely start to understand the sorts of changes that our research might bring about and build some sort of a plan in order to deliver that impact. Now, we know that we have to be flexible, but that doesn't mean planning is impossible. So what does planning mean? What does it involve? It means being able to outline and identify the stakeholders and associated activities that will increase the chance of research being used by those stakeholders and then generating impact. It means we have to think about who those stakeholders are, who our audience for our research is, and what resources we might need and how that involves building a team to deliver that. It also means we might need to think about setting up monitoring plans so that we can measure and monitor the impact of our research. And finally, understanding that plans may change as new opportunities arrive, but what we really need to have is a sense as the map by which the impact from our research can be navigated and delivered. We don't need that to be fixed and the plan that lasts forever, but we do need to have at least some understanding of it if we really want to maximize the potential impact of our research. So let's think about some of the skills we need to develop as researchers in order to deliver effective research impact. So we need to understand how to lead impact projects. We need to be able to communicate effectively, both with our research partners and our non-research partners. We need to develop a successful strategy and planning around impact. We need to be able to evaluate the impact of our research and measure and monitor it. We need to be able to build and engage with non-academic partners and build those successful networks. We need to be able to understand what skills it takes in order to deliver the impact from our research, to form those successful partnerships. And our institutions will also need to think about how to embed impact skills training and implement an effective and healthy impact strategy. So as a result of all this, Emerald have worked with Dr. Julie Bailey and Dr. David Phipps to develop an online impact support service that can support the development of impact literacy, the planning of impact, and the skills associated with impact delivery, alongside the building of healthy and supportive impact cultures across organizations. This is called Emerald Impact Services. So what does Emerald Impact Services consist of? It consists of 3 tools. Firstly, an impact planner that equips researchers to build realistic, appropriate, and achievable impact plans for their research. A large range of impact skills that strengthen the range of skills for researchers to understand impact, to plan for impact, and to deliver impact. And then an impact health check that supports institutions to build healthy and sustainable research impact environments. So let's look at these tools in a little bit more detail. Firstly, the Impact Planner. So the Impact Planner is for researchers to build a robust and credible impact plan alongside their research, and they can use this to prepare for an external research proposal, or to prepare for the next few years of their research. And the tool will guide researchers through firstly identifying and articulating the potential impact of their research, through to working out the stakeholders who they might want to be involving in their research and the end beneficiaries, and then finally building a evidence and evaluation plan to help them understand and measure and monitor and demonstrate their impact at the end of the process. Impact Skills is a database of over 200 pieces of skills, training and development content. It includes skills to help guide and support researchers through the planning and identification of impact, all the way through to delivery and evaluation and measurement. It also has skills that are relevant for institutions that will support training for impact, for example, and also support developing a healthy and positive culture around impact. So I'd like to thank you very much for listening today. On this slide, you can see a couple of links that you can click on that will give you more information about Emerald's approach to impact, and also to learn more about impact services and how it can support you in your research impact journey and your institution in developing that wider impact literacy. Thank you very much.